Hi, welcome to Tonnau Talks. My name is Dr. Caris John. I'm the Senior Specialist Educational Psychologist for Neathport Talbot's Tonnau team in the Educational Psychology Service. Today we're doing our Tonnau Talks on sleep, and I have with me today Caitlin Davis, who is our Assistant Educational Psychologist. As you can see on the screen there is a QR code that you can scan with your phone to gain access to our live sessions. Please be aware that you are listening to a pre-recorded Tonnau Talks on YouTube, and there will be parents who will be listening live who are able to ask us questions at the end. So please stay tuned for those later on. And if you would like to join us live, you can gain access using that QR code, and it will be displayed again at the end of this Tonnau Talks.
So, Harris, I suppose the biggest question we have at the moment is why are we talking about sleep today?
Yeah, so we decided to do this Tonnau Talk today on sleep is because it's such an important facet of life. It's essential. It's not something that is a luxury or that is something that we can choose to do. It is something that our bodies need, our bodies and our brains. So a lot of the Tonnau Talks that we've done in the past talking about confidence, emotional regulation, resilience, the teenage brain, they all rely on something really important happening in our lives, which we spend, a quarter of our life doing, which is sleeping. Sleeping has, huge powers to support lots of different processes in our bodies. It's been linked in a lot of research to affect health, both mental health and physical health. So it's really, really essential as part of a child's life and an adult's life as well. So, today's topic will be relevant not only to parents, but also to those parents listening to be considerate about themselves as well and their sleep.
And so from what I can hear is it's actually a really, really important part of our lives, and it's essential for our health and our well-being. So what is it about sleep specifically that is so important for our health and well-being?
Okay, so it's a good question because sleep is something that we have to do. We have to go to sleep, and it's something our bodies will automatically do at night, essentially. It's not something that we can try to avoid because, again, it's something that we need. It is vitally important as much as oxygen in our lungs. It is a process that we need. Animals sleep, humans need to sleep as well. In fact, that's something the body cannot live without is sleep. We've seen it in many research where, the effect of not sleeping can have huge impacts on the health of humans and animals. And in fact, when they previously, many years ago, did research using animals where they stopped them from sleeping, it actually caused them to die. So it is essential. It's not something that is, I know we sometimes see it as a luxury to be able to sleep, but it really is something that's so important. And that's something you will notice when you have such a good sleep. To wake up, maybe before your alarm goes off, you feel refreshed. You feel better, we do see these actual, clues that give us that reason that how important it is, because it can make us feel so much better. Not only is it important for our sort of waking time that we feel better, but whilst we're asleep, there's important processes that are going on there. It's important in terms of for our body. So whilst we're asleep, we're giving our body that chance to rest, to recharge our batteries. We're very still when we're sleeping, so it gives our muscles that chance to repair. It gives our bones those chance to grow if we're kids, and it's really important when we think about our immune system. So our immune system is that system within our body that can fight off nasty bugs and viruses. What goes on for our brain is really, really important. All those things that we have experienced throughout the day are vital for our brain to be able to repair during the night, but also for our brain to be able to store memories, and our brain to be able to store information about things we've learned. Without a good sleep, unfortunately, those things won't happen. And again, it's part of our circadian rhythm.
So, wow, it sounds like there's a lot of things going on that when we sleep that we don't even notice. We think that it's kind of we have no memory of it. Sometimes we know about dreams and stuff, but actually our brain and our body is putting in so much hard work to get us ready for what you call that kind of waking time. Make sure that we're healthy, that we process the previous day, we've stored it correctly, and that our body's kind of in a kind of almost homeostasis, so it's kind of as it should be. You mentioned something called circadian rhythm. So I've never actually heard about that before. Do you mind explaining what circadian rhythm is?
Yeah, so circadian rhythm is something that is currently being researched, and sleep as well. I mean, there's so much we don't know about sleep and circadian rhythm, even though they're constantly being explored. So circadian rhythm is all about our body clock, for example. So our body clock when it comes to not only sleeping, but also eating. It's also being awake during the day in those daylight hours. So our bodies are automatically on its own little clock, and generally we do stick to the same circadian rhythm. There's this, there's a few times where we do kind of bend the circadian rhythm. For example, we'll go on holiday and the time zone changes. So we change when we eat, we change when we go to sleep, we change when we wake. And that's all part of our circadian rhythm. Our bodies like routine. Okay, so they enjoy being in that rhythm. So circadian rhythm is really, really important because that's where our bodies feel at their best, within that rhythm. I don't know if you've ever worked night shifts, Caitlin, in the past, where we really do force our bodies out of the circadian rhythm. So, for example, if we work night shifts, we would be awake during the night and asleep during the day. So that's a change. We'd also eat our breakfast, lunch, and dinner at different times. So it'd probably be throughout the night, which again puts our circadian rhythm off. Now, I know a lot of people who work shifts, like night shifts, they can somewhat feel unwell during that change because their body is trying to cope with the massive change. And again, another thing where our circadian rhythm is interrupted is when we go on holidays, for example, to a different time zone. So we'll have to alter our circadian rhythm, and we can get something what we call jet lag, which ultimately feels awful. It's not a nice feeling. You feel unwell. So you can see then that the changes in our circadian rhythm for when we're awake, when we sleep, and when we eat can really affect how we feel generally. So it is something that's really, really important when we're thinking in terms of sleep.
Yeah, so it sounds as if our body has this kind of little internal routine that's kind of that dictates how and when we should be doing things. And actually, if we go against that, it can be really kind of disconcerting, kind of make us feel out of sorts because our body, kind of doesn't know what's going on and would like us preferably to stick to that routine. When we do sleep, Gareth, is there like one type of sleep, or is there different types of sleep? Kind of what is actual sleep?
Yeah, and that's a good question because you mentioned earlier about dreaming, and now that is a different type of sleep, isn't it? So yeah, it looks quite simple sleep. It looks like it's just as two stages. Okay, so what we've got is we've got non-REM and then we've got REM. So REM means rapid eye movement. Okay, so when you're in REM sleep. Okay, that is rapid eye movement. That's how we know that you're in it because your eyes will be rapidly moving. So it's very simple in that sense. So that's what I'll call REM sleep. REM sleep is that time where you dream, and that's where you will remember your dreams. Okay, so if you're not getting REM sleep, then you're not going to dream. So therefore, you won't remember your dreams. So, for example, if you woke up tomorrow morning, Caitlin, and you were like, "Oh, I don't remember my dreams," it could be likely that you never got into a decent REM sleep to be able to recall them. And REM sleep only lasts for like a minute to 30 minutes. It's averages around 10 minutes, so it's not actually that long. So, but it's very, very important. It's a part of that point where your brain is really switched off. The other type of sleep, which I mentioned, is non-REM. So it's non-rapid eye movement. Now, this is where you spend most of your time asleep, okay? This is where all those essential maintenance are being done. So your body is in a state where it's still, so where your mind is actually very highly active, okay? More active than when you're in REM sleep, so when you're dreaming. So non-REM is very, very important. Also, there's three stages of non-REM. So the first stage is when you start to fall asleep. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but some people experience where they might fall off a step and their body jumps, and in your mind, or you can start to feel yourself drifting off, and then you're thinking you're hearing something. So what happens in that first stage is that your body is just starting to shut down your senses. So you are still alert. Your body isn't quite in that state where your body is kind of paralyzed in a way, which is meant to happen to keep your muscles still. But you're still kind of in that getting to the second and third stages of non-REM. So that lasts about roughly, I'd say, about 10-ish minutes, or depends on the person. So you're still kind of alert-ish, they're starting to shut down your body movements and your different other senses, so your hearing. Then you move into some of the most important parts of your sleep, which is the non-REM stages 2 and 3, which is where you'll spend a lot more of your sleep time in. Now, this is where your body is very much under the sleep paralysis. You're not likely to move, depending on what, the thoughts, the brain activity that's going on. The brain activity, so they've done research on this, the brain activity when you're in non-REM stages 2 and 3 are very similar activity to when you're awake. Okay, so there's a lot going on there in your brain, even though your eyes are shut, so you're not getting any stimulus through your eyes. You're not getting your hearing's very much switched off. A lot of people are very difficult to wake when they're in these stages because their senses are very much dulled down because the brain is so active doing other things. So you might notice it with some of your children. They may fall asleep, or you might have to wake them up because you've got an early start and they're just not, you think they might be ignoring you, but they're not. They're likely in that stage of sleep where they're very difficult to arouse because those senses are switched off. So this time is so important because that brain is so active. There's a lot that's going on there, which, again, we don't know a great deal because there's so much research going on into the brain and sleep. But what we know is that this is where your brain is recharging. So we talked about that, recharging the battery, okay, because you need that time to sleep, but also where your brain is is busy organizing, I would say. It's like, I always say to children that during the day, your brain gets like a messy desk. There's all these things flying in from different places, all this information coming in, you're just kind of chucking it on the desk, and it's filled with papers throughout the day of all this information. And then whilst you're asleep in these stages of non-REM, stages 2 and 3, that's where I also say this little old lady comes out and she starts tidying your desk for you whilst you're asleep. So she'll start organising the bits of paper. Okay, some of them she'll look and go, don't need that, that can go in the bin. Okay, so some things get discarded. Other things go, oh, that's really important. That needs to go in that long-term memory bank. Okay, that actually needs to go in for thoughts about problem solving. So maybe we'll think about that tomorrow. What we often find is after people have gone to sleep with a problem on their mind, actually when they wake up they feel a bit better, and that's often because things look more clearer, because that messy desk has been cleared somewhat and things have been organized. So you kind of go, oh, I can deal with this problem now. But that's not it's not magical. It is actually your brain organizing it whilst you're asleep to be in a state that you can understand it better. So sleep is so important, because if you didn't go to sleep and your desk wasn't cleared, you would be your brain would be a jumbled mess, wouldn't it? With all this information, bits that you don't actually need to keep, which would only take up space, and really important things being hidden away that you can't see. So actually it's so important, that stage that children have, because when you think about the amount of information children receive throughout the day, it's a huge amount of information. They're in school learning, they're exploring their thoughts, and they're growing, and they're getting opinions about things, and they're learning new skills. Um, and it's so important that they have that time whilst they're asleep to organise that information. And when we think about our teenagers, they're going through a massive stage because their brains have absorbed so much information over the years. And when we talked about this on our Tonnau Talks, talking to teens, when we talked about the brain for teenagers, they're going through that stage of pruning. So that's where their brain is going, right, do I actually need to know about, to remember all these stories and these songs that I learnt during primary school? Okay, no, I don't use that very much, so I'm gonna get rid of that and make room for new stuff. And that's important process for our brains, because our teens don't ordinarily need to remember these things, and that's what happens during sleep.
So I suppose then it's like with the teenage brain, it's almost like an office refurb, you know. So if you think about our day-to-day sleep where they're just doing a little bit of tidying of our desks,
Yeah,
when you have that kind of teenage brain and we have that pruning, it's like the whole office is being remodeled, you know, and somebody's coming in and doing all that really intense organization, you know, clearing out the desks, making sure everything's, you know, kind of perfect, ready for that kind of that adult kind of development that's going to happen after the teenage years.
absolutely. And that happens even with smaller children as well. When you think about babies, they sleep a lot, don't they? And the amount of information they're taking in to be able to improve their physical movements. They need a sleep so that their bodies can grow and their muscles can grow to be able to learn to crawl, and then to walk, and then to run and jump. And that's essential as part of sleep, isn't it? And babies, they sleep a lot, don't they? So,
oh, definitely, and that's the thing is, you know, with all of our children, sleep is super important. Because like you said, you know, there's so much going on and there's so much of support in their development. So in terms of kind of children at different stages, how much sleep do they actually need?
that's a really good question. And again, there's no hard and fast rule here, because it depends on the individual. I know some people can survive with less sleep than others, but generally, what we'd expect is newborns, like birth to 3 months, would need between 14 and 17 hours. So that's a huge amount of sleep, but that is essential for their growth. Thinking about how much they change and from 0 to 3 months is a huge amount, isn't it? The skills. And again, then we've got sort of infants, which we'd classify between sort of 4 months and a year. Um, we're thinking between about 12 and 16 hours. And that includes kind of the nap time. So I know, but obviously babies don't sleep for all of that time. It's broken up throughout the day, these hours. Young children, sort of 1 to 5 years age, sort of 10 to 14 hours. And again, we'd still be expecting children up to 5 years to be having little naps. So we wouldn't expect them to sleep for 14 hours solid. It is, roughly, good 12 hours and then maybe a nap during the day. Then we've got our school age children. Now, children aged 6 to 12, we would say that they need, and this is surprising probably to hear, 9 to 12 hours. That is a long time. And I do wonder how many of our children ages 6 to 12 are getting 9 to 12 hours, because if you think about it, to get up for school, say at 7, they'd need to be going to bed around 7 or 8 o'clock. So when we've got younger children, between the ages of 6 to 12, what time are they going to bed? Because ultimately they have to get up at, say, 7 o'clock, I would say. Are they going to bed between 7 and 9? And that's what we would hope for those school age children. Now, our teenagers need 8 to 10 hours. And then adults 7 to 9 hours. So as a parent, are you getting your 7 to 9 hours? I know sometimes I'm not. I know that, there's lots going on as a parent that you've got to do, and also having that downtime as well. That sometimes we can, look at our clocks at night and think, oh my gosh, it's it's nearly 11, 12 o'clock and I'm still awake, and I've got to get up really early, and we forget sometimes ourselves to put ourselves to bed in that sense. So it's really important that we try and prioritize sleep for our children. It's really important. So when we're thinking about our teenagers needing 8 to 10 hours, are they getting 8 to 10 hours? Very unlikely, because what we know with teenagers, when we talked about circadian rhythm, so our circadian rhythm is based around the daylight hours. Okay, so we awake when the sun rises. That's what we should do. We get daylight then, which helps store up melatonin. Now, melatonin is something we create ourselves, and that melatonin builds up through the day under the daylight, and then starts to kick in and makes us feel sleepy. So that is what melatonin does. Now, with our teenagers, they're a bit different. Of course, they are different. Their circadian rhythm changes. So actually, our teenagers don't feel sleepy until 2 to 3 hours later than what would be normal. So, for example, an adult would start to feel sleepy around 10 o'clock, let's just say. Our teenagers won't start to feel sleepy until about midnight, but they still need that 8 to 10 hours of sleep. So what happens on a Monday morning then? We're shouting, come on, get up, but you're going to be late. You can't wake them. Sometimes the teenagers feel impossible to wake. Again, that's the stage of sleep that they're in. And again, they're not getting enough sleep.
My goodness. Yeah, I don't think you kind of ever truly realize how much sleep is actually needed, and you can see that as the kind of children go through their development, the kind of less sleep they need, but it's still significant chunks of their 24 hours, of their day. So I suppose that what I wanted to ask guys is this kind of a blanket rule? So, is it kind of like if you was a child age 10, they would need kind of, they would have to have a solid 10 hours?
Not
In a
really.
chunk.
Yeah, so we're talking in terms of chunks. So there is something that we call napping. Like I know that it's mentioned that, up to age 5, we'd still expect children to nap. Now, napping is something that it can be helpful, very helpful, but only in certain restricted time limits. So we know with napping, it's quite common for the Spanish. They have their siestas where they nap. That's been going on for years. And also in Japan, they have like a nap as well. But when we think about napping, it's really important that it's reduced to only about 30 minutes. So a nap for, say, 2 hours after school isn't good for a 10-year-old. So, for example, if a 10-year-old's only getting 8 hours in the night, giving them a 2-hour nap in the afternoon isn't good. That will really throw out their circadian rhythm, because within that stage of 2 hours, they are in the process of brain repair, aren't they? When we talked about that organization, and actually when they awake from that 2-hour nap, for example, they will feel worse. Okay, so it's really not helpful. 30 minutes, the research is showing us that 30 minutes is generally good, but it all depends on the individual. So, no more than 30 minutes, because that actually does really interfere with that circadian rhythm. And what will happen then is that they'll find it more difficult to fall asleep at that specific sleep time then, say, for example, 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I think that's something we've all kind of either experienced ourselves or experienced with our children, where, perhaps we've let nap time go on for a bit too long and then kind of, wake up really groggy, and then it's so much more difficult to go to sleep in the night then, because, we've almost met that quota too early. So you mentioned napping as being something that makes sleep kind of worse. Is there anything else that can impact our sleep?
Yeah, there's lots of things that can impact on our sleep. The things like the diets, for example, things like caffeine really do impact on our sleep. There's lots of things that we know that can really, really affect our sleep, such as the environment our children are in. It can be the amount of stress someone's feeling. So I know that, if I've felt I've had a stressful day, it might impact on our sleep. One of the hugest impacts, which shouldn't affect children, is alcohol. So just thinking that in terms of a parent, alcohol is one of the biggest detrimental things that you can have for sleep. So people having that nightcap, feeling that actually that will help them get to sleep sometimes, but actually doesn't help them have that really good sleep where we're talking about getting into those later stages of non-REM, which is 2 and 3, where all that processing is going on, that activity. In fact, the alcohol makes your metabolism worse, so actually you probably feel hungry, which really does affect your circadian rhythm. So, there's so many things that can affect sleep. Again, when we're thinking about waking up through the night, so if a child is woken because of noise, again, that will affect them getting back to sleep. And again, we talked about those long naps that can affect sleep, the amount of exercise they're doing. One of the most important things to do when you wake up is get yourself out into daylight, because daylight will help you sort of come round better. And this is something I've started doing, is sleeping with a gap in my curtain, so that when the natural daylight starts to come through, that it starts to gradually wake me up. Because waking to the shock of a noisy alarm is not good for you in terms of the moving forward for the day. Then if you're woken up with that kind of that jolt of the fright of the noise, it actually releases cortisol into your blood system, which isn't good for you. So there's lots of things that can make things worse. And I think in terms of children, we need to be mindful that watching scary things at night, that can make things worse. The amount of research that we're currently exploring in terms of blue light, so that includes not only screens, so devices such as phones, iPads, televisions, but also that we get blue light interference from the lights in our houses. So really, if we can reduce that as much, because that will stop us wanting to fall asleep. So the whole point of circadian rhythm is that when the daylight goes down, that's when our melatonin stores that we've built up through the day will then kick in. They'll get released to make us feel sleepy. Now, if we are exposing our eyes to screens and devices, it will actually keep us awake. So it won't help us fall asleep. And I know some people say, oh, having my device on, it helps me fall asleep. Unfortunately, the research doesn't support that, but it actually maintains your sort of levels of alertness. So that's one of the main things I would say, is like children's diet, their exercise during the day, and especially when you're thinking about the drinks that they are using, like things like Prime, full of sugar, caffeine's drinks as well, Lucozades and all of that, all have caffeine in them. They will severely affect their circadian rhythm, which will affect their ability to sleep. They say that with caffeine, you shouldn't drink caffeine under the age of 18, because it affects your brain. And I know I'm one of these that says I need caffeine to function in the morning. So I try not to drink caffeine after midday, because it is still in your system right when you want to start falling asleep. So that's another thing I've changed with my own sleep, is reducing the amount of caffeine. And again, when we think about our little children, we really want to reduce their screen time, so that they can be able to fall naturally asleep at the right time for them.
That's so interesting. One thing I just wanted to jump back to is, you mentioned kind of like scary movies and stuff like that. So I've heard kind of a lot around perhaps parents, children who are experiencing night terrors. And I'm just wondering, what actually are those? Because we speak a lot about them.
Yeah, no, good question, actually. So we've got things called nightmares, and we've got things called night terrors. Okay, so nightmares occur when you're in your REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. That's where you dream. Now, you will have a nightmare, and the only reason you know it's a nightmare is because you'll remember it. Okay, Night terrors do not happen during REM sleep. They happen during non-REM sleep, and that's where children won't remember them. Okay. However, from a parent's point of view, they are terrifying to watch, because your child will be screaming, they will be, moving around, very violently, they'll sit up, they'll jump, they'll cry, they'll scream, it's like the brain is in between kind of being asleep and being awake. And often those children are very inconsolable, because you can't communicate with them, because they actually are still asleep. So even though they sometimes appear awake, they're not, in fact. And again, they'll have no recollection of that night terror when they wake up. So it can be really worrying. And often, kids will go, back to sleep. It's, again, something we don't really know much about, but it is usual for children, roughly between the ages of 3 and 7, to have these night terrors. It's not really an indication of anything in particular. It's not something that we need to kind of be worried about. Although if you are worried about it, you can go to your GP if you are concerned about your child having night terrors. It's not an indication necessarily that something is wrong. It is something that our children's brains may go through. So it's not uncommon. And it is something that I know it's really not. It's very unpleasant for parents to witness, and it can be upsetting.
I think that'll be a relief for a lot of parents to hear. Like you said, it could be a really distressing experience. So we've talked a lot about what sleep is and the benefits of sleep and why it's so important. So what happens if we don't have enough sleep?
Yeah, so if we don't have enough sleep, again, I've talked about this, like when we're gonna we feel ill, don't we, and groggy, and
the
like
jet lag.
The jet lag is awful. So again, our muscles will ache. We feel a bit fluey sometimes. Forgetful is one of the things as well, because again, whilst we're sleeping, our brain is organised in that very messy desk with all those post-it notes and bits of paper that have just been thrown on us during the day. And again, if we don't have enough sleep, those bits don't get organised. So we don't store things in long-term memory. Okay, so that's where, sometimes parents can worry, sometimes thinking, oh, one day my child knew their 2 times tables and now they've forgotten. Often it could be an indication that they're not getting enough good sleep, and again, when I say get enough good sleep, it's really important that our children are getting enough quality rather than quantity. So even if a child may be sleeping for a long time, if they're waking throughout the night, that's not quality sleep. And that's really important for us to make that expression there, because that is so important when we're thinking about, what is enough sleep. We're talking about quality rather than quantity. We need to be mindful that with our teenagers, for example, we know that they can be quite moody, and their emotional regulations are poor. That's to be expected with our teenagers, but it will get worse if they don't have enough quality sleep. And the same with our little children as well. If we don't get enough quality sleep, we can be moody, irritable, we can be more emotional, forgetful, have a poor immune system as well. If it continues, we'll be not at our best to fight off viruses and flus and things like that. And so ultimately, by not having good quality sleep, you could also end up with a sleep debt.
That's something I've never heard of before. What is a sleep debt?
So a sleep debt ultimately is you owing quality sleep. So you're not getting enough quality sleep, say on Sunday night, Caitlin. And actually, when you wake up Monday, because you have to wake up for work, you actually owe sleep to yourself. Okay, so because you haven't had enough. So, for example, if you're the type of person that needs, say, 8 hours sleep, and you may have slept, gone to bed at the right time, but actually you took a while falling asleep, then you kind of remember waking up during the night, you've incurred then a sleep debt. So you owe yourself sleep time. So what you need to do then is make sure you try and get that back. And that may be that on the Monday, you need to have a 30-minute nap. That could help. and you've gained that back. And a sleep debt isn't something to worry about. It's something that we will always incur. We'll always have to have times where, like, oh, I've got a really important event that I need to get to, and I've got traveling time, so that actually we need to wake up really early, or, sometimes, during the week I've had to work late, or, the fire alarm went off in the night and I got woken up. So actually, I'm going to sleep in on Saturday morning because I can. And that will help you with your sleep debt as well. So it is something that happens, it's pretty normal, but we do actually need a set time for our sleep debt. We need to make sure that we are aware of, do you know what? I'm actually accruing debt now with my time this week, and I need to think about that now that I can sleep in a little bit longer on the weekend or go to bed earlier so that I can claw that back. That's something we can manage. And again, something when we think about our circadian rhythm, when we think about our sleep debt, is when the clocks go forward an hour. That causes the entire UK to go into a sleep debt of an hour. Now, we know that that those changes to the circadian rhythm of the UK does have detrimental effects. So research has shown that actually within the weeks after people having that sleep debt from that one change of that 1 hour actually does affect the amount of car accidents there are. It does affect the amount of people experiencing quite serious heart conditions such as heart attacks. It does affect people's mental health as well. So we know that actually having a prolonged sleep debt is not good for us. So just be mindful that, when those clocks go forward in the spring, that we need to be mindful. We need to claw back that hour somehow. We're okay coming out. It's October now, so we're gonna get that hour, extra in bed, which will help everyone with their sleep debt. But just prepare for the spring.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
So I suppose it's all about sleep budgeting, isn't it? It's kind of being mindful. So moving on from kind of what is actually sleep and the things we discussed. How can we actually improve our kids? How can we make sure they're having the best sleep that they can, and it's helping them in their development?
Yeah, no, good question. So sleep, it's basically getting to sleep, staying asleep, waking up refreshed. Okay, so in order to get to sleep, okay, children, they usually fall asleep within the first 20 minutes of going to bed. Now, these are children that do not have devices, that have the lights off, that have had good hygiene during, so I call it sleep hygiene during the day, where they've got out in the daylight, they've eaten healthily, not had too much sugar, not had any caffeine, they've been moving around, and they've had that's kind of good routine, that good kind of thing to be able to get to sleep. And that's something our bodies depend on, is that kind of routine that we've got, because it's really important that we help children to wind down, because then staying asleep is really important. I mean, they can wake during the night. I know some children will get up and might need to use the toilet, and again, they can do that and not often know that they're awake. So children are quite clever in that sense. They can get up, go to the toilet, kind of be in that state of in between sleep and awake, and go back to bed, and that's okay. So don't worry if your child is getting up through the night to use the toilet. If they can get back to sleep, that's really helpful. But you need them to try and stay asleep as much as we can. And that waking up refreshed is really important, that we are supporting our children to wake up refreshed. So in terms of how we get to sleep, okay, it all starts with what you're doing during the day. Okay, so are you eating at the right time? So when we think about our circadian rhythm, it's all about that routine, that body routine. So am I getting up at the same time every day? Often not with a lot of our children. That's another thing that I've changed recently, is even on the weekends, I'm going to wake up at the same time every single day. It's like I'm doing a bit of research on myself, really, to see if it can help, So it's interesting. It actually, it's been quite helpful to still wake up. Don't get me wrong, it's not great when it's a Saturday and you're like, can I have a lie-in? No, I'm going to still get up at 6:45. But again, it is really helpful to maintain that routine of getting up. It's really important as well that not only eating at the right time during the day, but also getting enough of that natural light. So, so important for our children when they're in school. Send them with their coats and their raincoats, because if they can get out of class and get out of the school building and have that time outdoors, getting that natural daylight, that will really help them build up that store of melatonin to help them then fall asleep later on in the day. So again, that's so, so important. Avoiding caffeine, again, talk about caffeine and sugar, chocolate even can be really, really bad. So try to avoid giving them these treats. If you have to, try to avoid it at least late afternoon, evening, giving them these treats, and especially avoid caffeine. That's really, really bad for our children. And again, during the day, keep those naps short. So if a child, for example, needs a nap, that's okay. Keep it to 30 minutes. That's really, really important.
A lot of really helpful things. It sounds as if actually in terms of getting good sleep, routine is absolutely imperative. And it's prepping your child, not just those 2 hours before bed, but it starts from the moment they wake up.
Yeah.
So in terms of when we are talking about those 2 hours before bed, how can we help our children to fall asleep? How can we support them in terms of that kind of, just before they are about to go to sleep? How can we help there as parents?
Yeah, great. So as long as we've done what, eaten
set them up through the day,
done that daytime thing. So those 2 hours before bedtime are really, really important. Okay. Have a set sleep schedule, as in we're tying it in with our circadian rhythm. So start this all at the same time. I know some parents will ease up during school holidays and routines go out the window. Try to avoid that, because that really does impact on their sleep, their ability to fall asleep, but also that quality of sleep.
If you don't, if you don't use it, you lose it type thing. So, if you're not using that routine, your body is going to fall out of that routine. That makes it so much more difficult then to regain that, prior to when they are starting back school, etc.
Absolutely. So having that same sleep schedule, as in, right, okay, every night we're going to start our bedtime routine at 8 p.m, for example. Stick to that. So that's your sleep schedule. Get them up at the same time every morning. That's your sleep schedule. But your bedtime routine is where you start to put things in place, such as having, reading a story together, having that bath, brushing your teeth, doing all that routine, which is the same thing. It's about, the kids know exactly what they need to do. They're getting prepped, they're getting reminders as well. Same with our teenagers. It's like, right, come on, it's going to be bedtime soon. You need to, whatever routine you've put in place, they need to start initiating that. So what you'd want to do is help them to relax, switch off devices. It's important that we try and reduce the amount of exposure to blue light, as I said, especially once the daylight has gone. We want our children to be as well prepared to fall asleep, and that can only be done when they're not, their melatonin isn't being disrupted by false light, which is coming from the screen. So that's really, really important. Relaxing before bedtime. Don't do exercises before bed. I know some people like to maybe go to do sports activities later on in the evening. That can really impact the ability to fall asleep and get to sleep. And also things like, when we talked about psychological safety the other day in one of our Tonnau Talks, it's important that our child feels safe in the environment that they're in. So some children might need a little night light, a very dim one. They might need, to be tucked in and have that routine of feeling safe and cushioned in, so it's really important that they have that time. And sometimes it can be really important for them at that point to talk about the day. Like, when I said about, when you go to sleep with the problems, often you wake up and it's kind of, you feel better about it. sometimes that's really helpful to do for a child, especially if they've got little worries, is to talk about them and to help them feel listened to, and also help them to kind of feel more relaxed then to go to sleep. Because that's really important. So anything that you've got planned for the next day, if they're a little bit worried about it, and we talked about that with, transitions and things, it's really important that our children are aware of them so they know what to expect, and that avoids them feeling a little bit worried. So that's really important. Things again like the environment of the bedroom is really important. So room temperature is really important. So we're getting to the season where the heating's going to start going on, if it's not already on for some of us. But our bodies actually need to be much cooler than with the temperature that we'd want during the day. So in order to fall asleep, our brains actually need to cool. So often, a lot of people like the feeling of a cold pillow.
Yeah.
The reason being is that our heads get very hot before we're starting to fall asleep, because our body's trying to get rid of that heat so that it can cool the body down so that we can fall asleep. So if we can make sure the rooms aren't too hot, that's really important, because I don't know if you've ever been abroad somewhere really hot and humid.
Nothing worse.
It's so hard to fall asleep, isn't it? And that's because our bodies are too hot. So it's better to be a little bit cooler rather than too warm. So that's really important. Again, noise as well. Remember, I said to you in that first stage of falling asleep, which lasts about 20 minutes, our ears are still kind of switched on somewhat. So any noise, we will be woken. So make sure that when you're trying to prepare your child for sleep, that you can try and restrict the noise as much as you can and control the noise, certainly for that first 20 minutes, so that they can, fall asleep. That's really, really important. And again, we talked about light. It's not good to have TVs on in bedrooms. It's not good to have lights on in bedrooms. It's certainly not good to have devices next to you and flicking on your screens on your phones before bed. Lots of research is coming out now about the impact of that. And I know a lot of parents really struggle with that, with their teenagers especially, with their devices. But it's really, really important that we try to reduce that as much in order to help them to fall asleep.
Yeah, those are some really fantastic suggestions. But I'm just wondering, what happens if I do all this? I set them up throughout the day. I have that bedtime routine. I make a sleepy bedroom environment, and they still can't go to sleep. What do I do then?
Yeah, so something is going wrong, isn't it? So
Yeah.
exactly, if you've done all those things and your child still can't get to sleep, the worst thing you can do is keep them in bed. Okay. What we want is bed to be a nice place for them to go, not to sit around tossing and turning, getting stressed because they're being told to go to sleep and they can't go to sleep. We need to do something different. So what I would do is get them up out of beds, because again, that they're not going to just fall asleep. Something is not quite right. I'd have a little chat with them. I'd wonder if something's on their mind, possibly, and that they may want to talk through, and give them something. Maybe they may be hungry, so give them something very light to eat, to help them, their stomach to sort of feel, more sort of not full, but that they're satisfied, because they might be a bit hungry. And read a story with them. Give them, if they're a teenager, give them a magazine to look at, just looking at the pages, because what that will help them do is switch off any thoughts that are going on in their brain that might be keeping them awake. So that's one thing I'd recommend, is do not try and force them to stay in bed, because they're only going to be left with their thoughts racing. And actually what they might need to do is have that kind of time away, just to kind of maybe think about things that may be going on for them.
I think that's a really good kind of general advice in terms of their bed being an only sleeping space. I think, and we're all guilty of it. And, as adults, we will do other things in bed, like go on our phones or read our books, or, I don't know, some people might kind of, with children, they might kind of play, bring their toys into bed. And, that's not necessarily helpful, because the brain then associates bed with things that are fun or things that keep us awake, whereas bed should be an only sleep space. It's really important that you, and for yourself as well, you kind of protect that space for when you need it the most, which is when you go into sleep. So, Kaz, what can we do then to help our children stay asleep? So we've got them into the bed, and they've gone to sleep, and then, like you said, it's that kind of that precarious period where, just before they enter the other stages of non-REM sleep. How can we kind of make sure that they stay in sleep?
No. So again, it would be making sure that there aren't disturbances. So making sure the environment is right. So the room temperature, again, we don't want to be blasting up the heating throughout the night, because they will warm up very much so and be, wake up. Again, with the senses, we don't want the lights to be on, because again, that will stimulate their eyes and also force them into starting to awake. That circadian rhythm responds to daylight or false daylight, which is what our lights are in our room. So don't keep the lights on. Again, with the room, maybe avoid things like a clock, because if a child is a little bit worried about time and how much time they're sleeping, again, don't have a clock there ticking where they can see, because they might be worried about that as well. And if they are waking up, it's important that we don't communicate too much with them, because again, they might not be fully awake. So even though they are walking, they're speaking to you. Again, if I was downstairs and my 6-year-old came downstairs and was awake, I would gently reassure them and guide them back up to upstairs, where I would then take them into that dark room, put them back into bed, maybe start reading them a story again very quietly to help them get back to sleep. Okay, so I would be doing all the things I would have done in the bedtime routine before to help them get back into that sleep. So children are going to wake. That does happen, but it's about how we respond to them. So not too much communication. So even if a kid is trying to ask you questions and trying to distract you and stop you from leaving and things like that, actually it's just about, I'll read you a story, talk to you, or I'll sit with you, and try not to engage in too much conversation with them. And one other thing as well, which I know a lot of people do, is try not to sleep with a pet. I know we all love Fido, the family dog, and the dog loves nothing other than sleeping on the bed. However, if you've ever slept with a dog, which I have when we went camping, they are the noisiest sleepers. They dream also, and they have night terrors too. They make a lot of noise, a lot of movement, and that can also wake our children. So poor little Fido would have to sleep downstairs.
Elsewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic, Haz. Those are some really, really great tips for our parents to help out our children sleep and to improve our children's sleep. So I think we've got some Tonnau top tips just to summarise all the fantastic strategies Caris has given us. So the first one being, putting in place our sleep schedule to support our circadian rhythm, making sure that we're having the same wake time, the same going to sleep time, and that we're kind of staying in tune with our body's rhythm and not kind of disrupting it, because we like we said, we don't want to have those feelings of jet lag or the things that come with kind of disturbed sleep. We want to, number 2, implement those daytime healthy habits, like we said, prepping our children for sleep from the moment they wake up, kind of making sure they don't have caffeine, they have healthy diets, not doing, they have an exercise but at the right time and not too much of it, all those things Cara's discussed earlier. Number 3 is putting in place a bedtime routine. Like we said, even though we're preparing them through the day, actually those last 2 hours or so before bed, making sure that we're helping our children to relax, that their environment is kind of conducive to sleep, that they can kind of have space to discuss their worries, so get them out of their mind. Just making sure that we really we kickstart that melatonin production and get them ready for a good night's sleep. And finally, like I just mentioned in there is making sure that we have an environment that's kind of ready for sleep. So making sure it's cool, it's quiet, there's dim lights if there are any lights, and it's an environment where our children are able to really relax, really kind of give into that melatonin production, and ultimately have a really good night's sleep for the amount of time that they require that sleep. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to move on and look at some questions and see if any have come in. So I'm just going to check for here, and it seems that we've got 2 questions today that have come in. So our first one, Caris, is my teenager comes home from school and falls asleep for a couple of hours. Oh, we're in nap territory here. What should I do about this?
Oh, okay. So we do get this a lot with our teenagers. And again, it's about remembering that teenage brain. I know teenagers unfortunately get the bad rap that they're lazy. And I can understand why they're seen as such, because they spend a lot of time in their rooms, in their bedroom, asleep. A lot of the time they like to sleep in, short on weekends. Your teenager is sleeping, all through the morning. And it's really, really important that when we're thinking about teenagers in particular, is that they accrue a massive sleep debt. Okay, so it's really important that we offer them those opportunities to be able to claw back some of that sleep debt. So what I'm saying here is that, yes, I would allow your teenager to sleep and have that nap, but I would reduce it to 30 minutes, because what that's going to do is actually, you let them sleep for those 2 hours, it's going to impact on their circadian rhythm. They're going to be groggy then for the rest of the evening. They might not be hungry at the time that dinner is served. So therefore then we are then impacting all those different types of circadian rhythms for that teenager. They then go into bed later because they already had 2 hours, which then when you're trying to wake them in the morning, it's too short a sleep that they would have had. So in fact, they're accruing even more sleep debt. And we know that's really detrimental. So what I would be saying is allow them to have that 30 minutes. That's really good. That can help them. You never know, they might wake up much happier because of that 30 minutes. And then they will be far better prepared to be able to fall asleep at a better time. Again, with our teenagers, they do sleep later during on the weekends, I know. And my best piece of advice would be to let them. If you can ensure that you do everything during the day to give them the best possibility to fall asleep a little bit later than so you would fall asleep. So, for example, if you're going to bed at 10 and they're going around, falling asleep about midnight, to allow them to sleep on during that Saturday will help them with the sleep debt that they would have accrued throughout the week by you waking them up for school. So yeah, that's something I would certainly say about teenagers.
Fantastic. So I suppose the main message is introducing our teenagers to power naps, the power of power naps.
Yeah, power napping is a thing. It is
a very helpful thing, it sounds. 30 minutes. Yeah, the 30-minute power nap. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Caris. And thank you to our listener for sending that in. I think that's a really helpful question that a lot of our parents who have teenagers are going to have in mind and will really benefit from the answer. So thank you so much for sending that in. We have a second question. The parent has said, my child says they can't fall asleep without the TV on.
Okay.
Is this okay?
Well, no. So yeah, that's a really good question. I know a lot of our parents struggle with that because the kids like to wind down with the TV, but ultimately the research says that it's not helpful. Now, I can completely understand that it's not helpful me saying, right, nope, turn off the telly, give them a book. That's not very helpful, I know. And actually what we need to be thinking in terms of supporting this is to be able to wean them off the television. So, for example, if your child has got television in their room and the TV is on, and I can imagine, TV is a very big screen, what they are being exposed to is a huge amount of light, false light, which will be really impacting on them falling asleep and then staying asleep and having that quality sleep that we really want them to have. What I would recommend in order to kind of wean this would be that they can, so if they have their favourite TV show that they fall asleep to, is actually only having the sound on. So I know with certainly iPads, I don't think you can do it with televisions. I'm sure there's someone out there that probably knows how to do this, but it's not me, unfortunately. I know that with iPads or other tablets, that you can actually play a video, which obviously has the sound and the screen. But if you turn your screen off, so if you press the lock screen, and you swipe on the lock screen, you can actually still press play on that tablet, but turn the tablet over, and the child can still hear the that familiar TV show that they know and actually they feel helps them fall asleep. They can listen to that then. So if you can get it's the light that's the problem. So I would certainly make sure that you reduce the light, and also if they are listening to so watching TV programs that are new to them and they are interested in, that is going to keep their brain stimulated and activated. We don't want that. So what I would recommend is using a TV show that they love and they probably watched over and over again, using that because there's no surprises. The interest isn't as high because they know it. They know what's coming next. For example, Friends and stuff like that. Those TV shows that kids, I know there's TV shows out there, but I would recommend that as a kind of a way to wean off that big screen, which is really impacting on their ability to fall asleep.
I suppose one thing there would be as well, if you're going to do that kind of that auditory track where you have the show playing, is making sure that you set aside time to go in and turn that off when they are asleep.
Absolutely.
Because that's going to be something that might kind of impact, like you said, the quality of their sleep, or wake them up throughout the night. I think having been a teenager myself, I have plenty of memories of sleepovers where I've woken up in a shock to like a DVD playing on loop, like the theme song. It's an unpleasant memory, but ultimately making sure that you're turning that off so that it's not kind of coming back to wake them up at a later time during their sleep. But again, thank you so much to our listener for asking that question. I think it's a really, really important one. It's one we're definitely hearing more of as technology becomes a bigger part of our life. Thank you for the questions. Really appreciate it.
So thank you everyone for joining us today for our Tonnau Talks on sleep. As you can see, there's the QR code again. If you'd like to join us on our live sessions, please scan that for up-to-date schedule. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch.